Hi, I'm Diane with the New Brain for Business Institute.
And I'm Rich Drafton.
And we're talking about learning today, and thought that we would use some of our own experience to talk a little bit about that. And what you just heard is the result of some learning on both our parts.
The music you just heard, sort of amateur music that we play regularly, is a result of a lot of things we've learned and practiced. And we know in business, learning's a big deal. You have learning departments, chief learning officers, learning cultures, learning programs, and we all imagine that everybody is learning or needs to learn something on the job. And you know, in some other conversation, we can take on the how of the learning. Today, we really want to focus on why learning happens. What's going on in the brain of the learner, not the teacher. And we spend lots of time thinking about what teachers should do and not quite as much talking about what learners are doing and how we get aligned with that. And you've seen an example here that we'll use to talk about learning as it happens and what the drivers, what the motivators are for learning. So, Diane, I know that you put a little organ in there from your keyboard. Share with the folks, you know, your experience with taking some piano lessons a while back and how that went for you.
Okay, good. So I decided a couple of years ago that I wanted to take piano lessons. I had taken piano lessons and actually knew how to play the piano pretty well when I was a kid, and I had stopped and went for a very long time not playing. And I got interested in it again, primarily because Rich loves music as much as I do, and he plays so much, and I felt like I could play music with him. So found myself a really good piano teacher, actually. I still feel like he was very good, and began working with him. And what I began to discover was that my expectations about how quickly I should learn, about how easy it should be, about what I was going to be able to do with it upon learning certain things, were pretty regularly disappointed. And as a result of that, I began to back off. And the more I backed off, even though I was still having Greg, my piano teacher, come on a regular basis, the worse it got for me.
The pressure for your achievement to learn scales or keys, as that began to mount, you began to resist practice.
Yes.
To kind of not look forward to the lessons, and it seemed to me that there was an emotional resistance to digging into it.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of things that were happening. One of them was I was disappointed, and therefore it was harder for me to get excited about it. And the other was that as I became disappointed in myself, my expectations about myself now, not about how I was going to learn, you know, through this process with the teacher, but about myself began to drop and no longer matched any expectation that would have been reasonable about what I could do. So Greg would show up, I would feel unprepared, I wouldn't play as well as I thought I should. He was actually very good in dealing with that, as you'll remember. But it just kind of spiraled down for me.
It seemed that even though he was a good teacher, his good teaching didn't seem to be able to overcome your old brain energy around being embarrassed and not being proficient and so forth.
That's a really good way of putting it. And for those of you who aren't familiar with old and new brain, you can find a lot of information and our book on our website if you want to go there. But just the old brain thing, I think, is absolutely right. So I'd like to fast forward then to what got me back onto the keyboard. So I just backed away from it, and then, probably several months later, I started playing around one day, and wow, I knew more things than I thought I did. But I began to get interested in it again, and at the same time, I also sing, and Rich and I were beginning to put particular songs together and tried to master them. And I discovered that if instead of mastering the keyboard, what I focused on was mastering a song, then I could actually begin to play some keyboard with that song. And that has led to me now playing keyboard on probably 30 or 40 songs. Not fancy, mind you, but it feels very good to me. I feel like I have accomplished something, but more than that, I feel like I have been able to make something happen that's meaningful to me.
Right. And that sort of highlights, in various ways, the three motivational paths to learning. One of them is you can shame or embarrass or threaten someone into doing something.
Or you can do it to yourself, like I did.
Yeah.
That's a significant point that we do in our organizations, that even if we're not inflicting that fear, learning is a forum for us to inflict it on ourselves.
Right. And so, fear is one path. Another path is, and this is probably the most common one in business, is achievement, to reach some threshold. And often there's fear and threat associated with those thresholds. If you don't learn how to do this, you won't have this job, kinds of things. But often, if none of that's coming forth from the organization, we apply it to ourselves. Our old brain will threaten us with shame and ostracism if we don't measure up, so to speak. And there are times when, learning necessarily is about achieving some threshold. But if it's learning that comes from fear or achievement, typically you get sort of minimal requirement. What's just enough to get over the threshold, then I move on and I quit thinking about it. Now, if we go to the third path, which we would talk about as mastery as opposed to achievement, we get a very different kind of approach. So I never set goals for myself in terms of I need to learn this song or I'm going to be in a concert. I just wanted to master the instrument. I wanted to feel proficient in music. And that had to do with some very, even though music has some old brain components and some right brain components in it, it requires a lot of thinking. You have to read, and force mechanical things to happen with your fingers. And the new brain stuff happens there. But more importantly, the sense of mastery gets at our sense of self. And our sense of self is available to us not so much from our old brain, but from that part of our new brain that allows us to take a third eye perspective. And that's usually a perspective that's seriously disrupted when our old brain is excited. And so when we get into mastery learning, we have this appetite to devour it. And once we learn something, we don't just move on. It continues to cycle and make additional connections and more conceptual references within our own thought matrices and our thinking patterns. And all of that creates the kind of learning we typically say we want in people in business, which is own it, love it, get after it with passion. And, achievement-based learning just usually falls far short there. And, if you have a choice for your own learning, I think mastery is the kind of the plan you want to have. And so how do you create that sense in the people around you? Well, as we've talked in other videos and certainly in our book, A New Brain for Business, it's about creating a real clear sense of vision and mission for your people. Give them a story that they can sign up for that really means something to them, and they can be part of that. And that's where they will want to master the universe that you open up for them if you do it in a really engaging and challenging way. And try that out for size.
Good. We're going to be talking about learning on our website pretty much the month of November, maybe going further than that, but this has really come up as a subject for us we think that will be helpful to you. We also have a monthly newsletter, and if you'd like to sign up for it, we'd love for you to do so on our website again at www.newbrainforbusiness.com. So thanks for checking in. Hope this was helpful, and we'll look forward to being in touch with you soon. Thanks.
So let's master a little music.
Okay.